It's time for the Wrestling Observer Extra.
One more time for old time's sake.
With Dave Meltzer, right here on The Law, live audio wrestling.
And let's go. We're now smoking with the best.
Welcome back. It is indeed second hour of The Law, live audio wrestling. Dave Meltzer, things, despite UFC this week, calm down a little bit?
No.
I guess not.
I don't think I can say that.
I guess it's kind of unfair. I mean, along with what has gone on recently with WrestleMania, of course, that's the busiest weekend of the year for you, for us as well. But one thing that I've been constantly asked about this week, and we pretty much saved this for you on the show, is naturally the Mauro Ranallo situation. Yeah, we had to go there first, Dave. We were asked about it numerous times, and I mean, you wrote a tremendous article in the Wrestling Observer last week about this. Now, the recent developments with the Mauro situation are the fact that there's been the removal of WWE from all of his social media references and vice versa from the WWE removing him. He's under contract till August, but I mean, we know Mauro. We have worked with Mauro, and when we heard he was going to WWE, knowing what the landscape is like in WWE and the politics there and the culture there, we knew it was going to be tough for Mauro. But a lot of heat is coming to JBL in regards to what's gone on here. So can you give a bit of an overview of the situation in the way that, you know, you had covered in the Observer?
Well, I mean, he's not there anymore, and you know, it's hard for me to like pick out and say exactly what happened, but JBL obviously was a big part of it, and it's not the first time that JBL's been a big part of things like this, and it's, you know, when you really look back at everything, I think with me what happened, I've written a couple of articles about it. The first one was kind of like, well, you know, sometimes things happen and you don't exactly know what the repercussions of what you do are going to be. But then, I mean, as fate would have it, when I was going to WrestleMania, I read Justin Roberts' book, and it just kind of hit me that this has been going on for 15 years. It's like, should I really be sympathetic about this story to JBL of all people? And it's kind of like he's been doing this for years, and you know, it should have stopped. It should have never started. It should have stopped a decade plus ago. And it reflects horribly on the company that this incident with Mauro happened.
It's amazing, Dave, because it seems to be like one of those, despite them being, you know, the biggest entertainment spectacle and, you know, having all the money and the big touring and production, this aspect, it's such an old aspect of professional wrestling, the bullying of talent and things. And it just seems to me amazing in 2017 that they still think like this.
Well, it's not. You know, it's funny. It's like it's not really the bullying of wrestlers, because it's wrestling is a weird game in the sense that it's a very difficult sport to do in a sense, kind of like, you know, like a Division I wrestling or boxing or something. I mean, these are really, really hard sports to do. But that's talent. But when it goes to announcers or people like that, I mean, that's just ridiculous. You know, they're there to augment the show, and for them to be bullied by wrestlers, it's just really a bad situation.
Well, especially when he's like probably the best announcer that you've got in the entire company. I mean, come on, it just seems so petty.
That played into it. I think that was the whole thing. I mean, I think the thing with Mauro Ranallo, and I think the stuff that's really the saddest is that, like what you guys said at the beginning, and when it all went down, it's like, was anybody? It's like there were people who were surprised, but anyone who knew the situation from day one, it wasn't a surprise that it was going to end this way.
No.
It was just, you know, it was like, is it going to take 6 months? Is it going to take 18 months?
Right.
And the whole thing, and the whole thing was going to be, they brought him in because they wanted somebody different from their announcers, okay? And that's well and good, and he was different. And then Vince wanted to make him just like everybody else. And that's when the problem was going to be, and that's what happened is, you know, he hired him because he was different, and then he didn't want him to be different anymore, so then he becomes, you know, whatever the situation. And it's not like he's the first guy. I mean, you know, we've seen it with how many other guys. I mean, the funny thing is that, you know, whether it was Joey Styles or even coachmen for that matter, Jim Ross, obviously, time after time. It's like, this is not, Mick Foley. This is not something new. I mean, it's a steady Taz. I mean, it's a steady pattern, really. It's like Vince just, bullies announcers, and because of that, you're going to have some people handle it better than others, but nobody handles it well. I mean, guys have quit over it. Guys have been let go over it. There've been a steady stream of announcing changes. And this is, unfortunately, I was really upset about this one because their lack of caring about the situation really bothered me a lot. And I mean, that's the thing that really, I think, bothered me. It's one thing if it's Jim Ross who knows the system and knows the game, and he's been up and down it many times, and he'll be up and down it, another time. I mean, that's just how it's going to go. But for somebody who you go in, I mean, it's like Mauro's issues are, he's the first one to talk about it. So you know it going in, and then you still do the same thing, and then you got this end result. It's like they caused it, and they should have known, they should have known better, and there's no sympathy. There's no sympathy on that one. Sorry.
Yeah. Now, Dave, is this something that will probably never change until Vince is no longer part of the company? Like, when does this change?
Who knows? Because, who knows? I mean, Vince will always do the right thing to save his company. So, I mean, if it becomes a big story, Vince will probably have to change to a certain degree. And if it doesn't, they'll continue. And, I mean, people, putting the blame on Layfield, and it's like, Layfield, I mean, it's like he's a pawn in this game. You know what I mean? It's the culture of the it's hardly just him, but I mean, he's become kind of the target because in this case, he was the guy, but if it wasn't him, it was going to be somebody else anyway.
Dave, you mentioned if it becomes a big story, things could change. So what do you think, in your estimation? I mean, here we have someone... I think part of the difference here is this is also Mauro Ranallo. This is someone with a star outside of the WWE landscape who's, been on CBS, who's called major boxing fights and MMA fights as well, is more of a sports personality over a wrestling personality, and is very open with his bipolar disorder. Do you believe that there, in the media landscape, that this can become a story and change can be had due to what's happened here?
It can. I don't know that it will, but it absolutely can. I mean, I think back. I mean, just as a story, and it's not the same thing, but in a sense, in a weird way, there's a similarity. But do you remember the Ariel Helwani story with Dana White when they banned him a year ago? Okay, it's like that easily could have just been something that nothing happened. And when it happened, I mean, I was there the night that the whole thing happened, and it was like, oh boy, this could be a mess. But you know how that all turned out. It became because of whatever it was, because Ariel Helwani was kind of a popular guy. It became like a huge media story. Now this hasn't yet. But it's like, potentially could it? More as a TV personality. He does boxing. He did the Mayweather and, Pacquiao fight, the biggest sporting event aside from the Super Bowl in years. And, yes, it could happen and it could not happen. And I don't know which will happen. You're going to have to watch the thing play out over the next couple of weeks.
I think
it's real bad for WWE.
I think part of the difference, though, Dave, might be if something doesn't go down, you're going to get the common response of, oh, well, it's wrestling. It didn't happen.
That is their saving grace, and it always has been.
Yeah,
is that people will go like in the media, like if this situation happened in UFC, I mean, I would say 95% that it would become a huge story. If Dana White did something like this and caused whatever, but because it's like wrestling, yes, there will be people who will just go, it's wrestling, we don't cover wrestling, or I just don't want to get involved in it, or just it's beneath me to get involved in it. So, that's the saving grace for them, yes.
Well, we'll follow along with that story, of course. Flipping over to cover the product that bullies their announcers. The Superstar Shake-Up is tomorrow night. What do you... By the way, do we know a format? Is there any rumor?
And since I really don't know.
Yeah.
I just think that there's going to be people going back and forth in brands, and... I don't think it's going to be like massive, but I think it's going to be, there'll be, I mean, how many significant people can they change, really? I mean, but there'll be some. AJ Styles is the one that everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
And
what about Roman?
I mean, I've heard Roman's name. I mean, I last week I was told no way, and then during the week it was kind of like, well, it could happen. So we'll see. Yeah, it could happen. The thing with Roman is like if he does go, then, I mean, Roman and Lesnar are still on as the main event for next year's WrestleMania.
Right.
So, I guess you could do Roman and Lesnar on different brands like they did Lesnar and Randy Orton. And so that's possible, too.
I'm just curious, like Jay said, how they're going to do it. It sounds like they're just going to pick hats out of, like, are they just going to pick names out of a hat?
I actually don't. I think that by calling it a shake-up, they're not necessarily doing it a draft, and I think we might actually see, with both GMs there, some trades take place tomorrow. Yeah,
that's what I think. It'll be something like that. Yeah,
I would hope that.
Because we don't have Triple H, so we can't have like 5 guys for Triple H.
I would hope that at least this time they'll tell everybody and not do like what they did to JR that one time.
Oh, I'm sure that they're not telling anybody, except for maybe 1 or 2 guys. Everyone. I mean, all I know is that all the Raw people have been told that they've got to go to Tuesday to SmackDown, and they haven't been told anything else. So yeah, I don't think that anyone's. Maybe 1 or 2 top guys are going to know. But as far as middle people, I'm sure they're not being told ahead of time. That's, because they're afraid it'll get out, even though, that's how they've done it. Every draft, almost nobody knows before the draft.
What was this something that was planned to take place after Mania, Dave, or is it just something they kind of felt that they needed to do, or?
It's been talked about, for months. So yeah, it was planned. I mean, I didn't know what week it was going to happen. But yeah, I mean, it was always planned to make a couple of big moves to shake things up, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's like it's one of the advantages of having 2 brands is that when you do stuff like that, you do kind of freshen up certain things and you create new matchups, and I'm all for it. I mean, as long as both shows kind of come out even when it's over, and who knows if that'll happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, SmackDown is already under Raw as to begin with. They need this more than Raw does, I think.
Well, they lost John Cena, and John Cena was the one thing that was keeping them strong. Not that like Randy Orton or AJ Styles and all that was weak, and they were actually doing, to me, pretty decent in the ratings, and their house show business when Cena was there was actually beating Raw's house show business this whole year. But John is such a monster, and with him being gone. But, who knows? Maybe Nakamura can, be that guy. I mean, week 1, Nakamura's reaction was fantastic, but look at the audience, so you don't really know if that's indicative of what's going forward or not.
Speaking of comings and goings, we did see one release happen. Simon Gotch no longer with WWE, and that means the Vaudevillains are no longer. As far as Gotch's release goes, I mean, they really weren't using him all that much, aside from little bits and pieces with the tag team. What was the rationale behind that?
He had tremendous heat on him. A lot of people, I mean, this is something that people have been talking about for months, and so it wasn't a shock. And then the other end of it was that I think that they wanted to give Aiden English a singles push, and once you do that, I mean, there's really no. I mean, it's not like he stood out. You know what I mean? He was just a guy.
And one other quick one too, Dave, except from TNA, Aron Rex, he's done with the company now. Seems a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I thought so. He'd only just started. I don't know if it's some, and I don't know if it was like new ownership. I mean, not new. Well, it is new ownership, but I don't know if Jeff just didn't want him as part of the plans, or maybe they just couldn't come to a deal like with Galloway and these other guys. I don't know what the story is. I was a little bit surprised, but I mean, it's not like he was knocking them dead there either.
No, that is for sure. Yeah. There's a guy who could have walked in hot.
It's not like it was Matt Hardy or Jeff Hardy.
Right.
Yeah, they had already gone ahead and lost them. And now, what a strange character he ended up being, just out of nowhere. All right, Dave, so The Observer this week, highlights?
I mean, there's going to be more on the Mauro Ranallo stuff. The New Japan show from today, which had an incredible main event.
Main event was awesome. Yeah, I love the main event.
Yeah. And then, obviously, heavy coverage of the draft. And, there were a couple deaths in Mexico, Fishman and Joaquin Roldan. Mm-hmm. And, the UFC, Uriah Faber in the Hall of Fame. And they may announce some other Hall of Famers. I mean, all the Hall of Famers will be announced in the next couple of weeks. So that will be some interesting stuff, too. who knows what else is going to break?
Yeah, well, tomorrow, the next 2 days, the
Yep.
interest level will remain high with the shake-up. So we look forward to reading that.
Yeah, I mean, we know that's going to end up being a big story, however it turns out.
Great job on the Mauro piece, Dave.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been commenting on it. I know it was a tough one for you to do, but it was done very well.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dave. We'll talk to you next week at this same time.
Okay, have a great week.
You too. Dave Meltzer, WrestlingObserver.com. If you do, I mean, I've had a lot of tweets asking me about that situation, but WrestlingObserver.com, go sign up, read The Observer. Great place to start if you want to know the behind the scenes on that, what's happened with Ranallo. And we will continue to keep you updated each week here on the show.